Well, welcome back, everyone. I am Dr. Lisa Marie. I am so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're taking this time to take this Radiant Reflections journal process and like steps with us. I am glad that you're taking this time to kind of reflect and to look at things in your life. And I appreciate you sharing and I appreciate your comments. I appreciate the fact that you have been dedicated to coming and taking part in the lives or watching the videos afterwards. And as we begin to kind of come to our close of the videos, it does not have to end there. Get your journal if you haven't already. Begin to talk to your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers, your sisters, your cousins, your aunts, the ladies, the women in your life, and begin to form a group where you can work together on your journals, where you can partner together to take the journey together. You don't have to do it alone. And so I'm encouraging you to do that. As I've been saying, everything has been coming from the Radiant Reflections Journal. If you haven't already done so, I'm encouraging you to get it. I'm encouraging you to do the work. We've started here. Now it's up to you to keep the journey going. And so, with that, I'm going to jump right in. And the affirmation that I'm going to use tonight is I have the courage to take risk and step outside my comfort zone. I'm going to read that again. I have the courage to take risk and step outside my comfort zone. And here's the scripture that was used, Joshua 1 and 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And as I said, as we begin to wind down these daily videos and daily lives, be courageous. Step out there. Don't be discouraged. Things happen. Life happens. We go through changes. We see things happening in our communities. We see things happening in the United States. We see things happening in the world. But be courageous. Keep moving forward on the journey. Keep stepping forward. Keep counting your wins, no matter how small. And so tonight, I just want to talk about having courage to step into whatever the purpose God has for you. Being able to step out there. And when we think about that, sometimes it can be a little daunting. It can be a little unnerving to have to step out in the unknown, and sometimes even in the known. And looking at that, looking at like, what do I do now? I hope that through these many videos and these many lives that you have been able to, take some tangible tools to help you navigate whatever circumstance and situation. I hope that you are able to take the information that was provided and apply it and continue to apply it. But whatever step of life you're in and wherever you're going, it's going to require us to do it with courage. And so we want to make sure we're facing every challenge with courage. And it doesn't have to be negative. It could be something positive, but it still requires courage. And so when we look at, emotional courage, I want to talk about different types of courage. Emotional courage, facing feelings of vulnerability. And it could involve feelings of finding difficulty in situations, like feeling fear, feeling sadness, even anger, because I'm feeling vulnerable. Remember, I talked about in so many of the videos about emotions taking up residence. I used the analogy, how you buy something, you see something and you love it and you buy it and you place it in your home. And every time you walk by it, you notice it because you really like it. But then eventually, it just becomes another item in the home. It takes up residence, and you don't really see it until something happens. It's bumped. It's, you hit your foot on it, whatever the case might be. But then you notice it again. That's like our emotions. Something might stir it up, and I become angry. I become sad. I become fearful. And so we want to deal with those emotions. We want to heal from emotions that leave us feeling vulnerable. Heal from emotions that leave us feeling lost and confused. Maybe there's some kind of trauma. Maybe it's a past relationship. Maybe it's something I've done. Maybe it's the words that I've been told and I've internalized. Maybe it's the words I've said to myself. But having some emotional courage, that this is uncomfortable, but I'm willing to go through it. I'm feeling angry over all that's going on, but I have the courage to persevere through it. I'm feeling sad. That's my emotion, but I have the courage to identify and address it. So having that emotional courage to address those emotions. Remember, I talked in many videos about setting boundaries. Sometimes we get bombarded with doing so much that we get overwhelmed in our emotions. And so I'm encouraging you as you move forward, not just today or tomorrow or the end of this year or 2025. I'm encouraging you every day of your life to be aware of your boundaries. Now, I'm not saying that, you have to be focused on them 24/7, but I'm saying be aware of how not having boundaries or having loose boundaries can impact you emotionally. I did a live that said, let your yes be yes and your no be no, on setting boundaries. And so practice that. Practice that to maintain that emotional courage. Have the courage to say no. And so let's work on that. Looking at how having that emotional courage allows us to face problems. It allows us to look at an issue and face it directly. We're not trying to avoid the emotions. We're not trying to suppress the emotions. We face it head on. And so doing that check, do I have emotional courage? If not, that's an area I want to work on. Then looking at spiritual courage, what does that look like? Trusting God's plan when we don't see it all the way through. Trusting that God has a plan for us. Oftentimes, we might lose courage because I'm stepping out and I'm doing these things and I don't really see the full picture. And so I start to feel like it's a bit much for me. I'm overwhelmed. Having some spiritual courage. Spiritual courage to stand on faith. Being aware that God has us. Being able to step out and do exactly what He's called us to do. It requires us to surrender our fears. Ooh, that's a deep one. God, I don't see it, but I surrender. I surrender that to you, Lord. God, I'm a little uncertain about the steps. I surrender to you, Lord. I know that you know the plans that you have for me. I ask you to order my steps. And so that spiritual courage, believing that He's giving you what you need to go through any challenges, any difficulties, any ups and any downs. Spiritual courage. Reducing that anxiety of I just don't know, or that stress of I just don't know. Spiritual courage. It allows us to shift our focus from the situation to God, you got this. I'm trusted and believing that you have it. Being anchored in faith, in God's promise, knowing that He has a plan for you. Whether you're running a business, whether you are working in a job, whether you are working from your home, whether you're raising family, whether you're in school, whatever. Whether you're doing multiple things. Trusting God's promise. Having that spiritual courage to say, God, it's been difficult, but I still trust you. I trust you to get me through. I trust that no matter what, you've got me. Right? And so let's really rely on that. Then the courage to face challenges. Real challenges. Uncertainties. Because as we walk through this life, there's health issues, there's financial issues, there's, social issues. There's all kind of things that take place. We have no control over those things. We do not have the ability to say everything's going to be perfect in my life. But we can develop the courage to navigate the changes, to deal with the things as they come. Being able to look at crises, look at social unrest, look at financial downfalls, look at the job market and the housing market and the education system and all the other systems. Looking at the workforce. All of these things can cause stress and anxiety. They can be challenging. But when we look at those challenges and we look at, do I have the courage to face them? What do I need to do? Being able to face them by developing problem-solving skills and strategies. Looking at a situation, getting my emotions in check before I respond, and setting a plan. We can't change certain things. We can't dictate things, but we can have the ability and the courage and the resiliency to get through them. And so I'm encouraging that. Then having the courage to do what God called you to do. Because throughout these lives and videos, I've been talking about purpose. Having the courage to step out on purpose. What have you been called to do? What have you been procrastinating about? I talked about imposter syndrome. And then I talked about perfectionism, which can hinder us from stepping out on purpose. And so looking at that, what's God's plan for you? And are you walking in it? And you say, okay, Dr. Lisa, I'm walking in it. I'm walking in it. Wonderful. I'm excited for you for that. But is there more that you could be doing? Is there something else? Or could you speed up the steps of your walk? Having the courage to do that. Having the courage to say, okay, God is telling me I need to expand. Or God is telling me I need to create this. Or God is telling me I need to write this book. Or God is telling me I need to create this program. But I don't even know where to start. But I have the courage to carry out what He's calling me to do. avoiding that imposter syndrome that I don't know what I'm doing, I'm faking it. Or that perfectionism where I'm like, it has to be just perfect, and there's a standard that if it doesn't meet it, it's garbage. So we have to have that courage to step out on God's plan and his purpose for us. There's need for you. There's a purpose that God has placed in you because there's something or someone that needs you. And so having the courage to step out to fill that need. Then the courage to love yourself. I talked about self-love and sometimes how difficult it is. The courage to love yourself despite what others may say, despite the social standards that people have set, for women and especially women of color, and despite these ideologies that say you're supposed to look like this and you're supposed to dress like this and you're supposed to do this things and you're supposed to do that, and we're under this umbrella that makes it difficult to love ourselves if we don't fit into those patterns. Encouraging you to find the courage to love yourself. Find the courage to see yourself how God sees you. Not as the world sees you, not as man sees you, not as society, not as social media, not as the trends and the fads that come and go, but as God, how God sees you. Fearfully and wonderfully made. Courage to love yourself. If you haven't watched that video, I'm encouraging you to go back and do so. Because we want that courage. Because without that, everything else I'm talking about is almost impossible. And so I'm encouraging you to love yourself. See yourself how Christ sees you, how God sees you. You're beautiful. You're priceless. And don't let anyone else tell you any different. When we love ourselves, we can get rid of self-criticism and self-esteem issues and have compassion for ourselves. Right? And so that's what we want to do. And we want to be able to have the courage to embrace God's blessings despite challenges. Embrace all that he has for you. Embrace the things that he has said, this is going to be yours, and you're going to be able to do this, and you're going to do that. The courage to accept those things. Now, I talked in one of the videos about loving yourself and about not it being pride and prideful. And so sometimes when we're doing very well and things are flowing for us and God is blessing us, we might get a little taken aback, like, oh, I don't want to seem prideful. But have the courage to accept the many and multiple blessings that God has for you. And as he's blessing you, it gives you more opportunity to bless others. It gives you more opportunity to step out in your purpose. Isn't that a beautiful thing, how it keeps going? And so we want to keep focusing on courage. We want to keep focusing on each area of courage. And if we see an area where I might need to work on, now we have a plan. We can create a plan. And how do we create that plan? What do? We look at, am I resilient in this area? We look at, how do I regulate my emotions, and what are my hopes, and what are my, how do I look at where I want to go? How do I look at what God is saying about me and for me? Am I fearful? in doing that? When I start seeing all that God is doing in me, do I rise up with courage and take hold of it and move forward in his plan? Or do I retreat? Do I take a step back? Because as we move forward, life still kind of zips past us. And we need the courage to keep moving through it. We need the courage to keep moving through it. And so what can we do? Because what tends to happen, and I've been saying this quite a bit, is the thoughts and the words that we say, the narrative that rolls around in our heads. What am I saying to myself? Whose voice am I hearing speaking that's making me fearful? Fearful to succeed, fearful to make changes, fearful to step out in purpose. And so we need to look at that voice. We need to address that voice. What is being said? In one of my previous videos, I talked about labels and names and words that are spoken that take up residence. What's living in my thoughts? What's living in my heart? You know, when people clean around the springtime, they say they do spring cleaning. Sometimes we need to do some mental cleaning. We need to go in and look at those things and what is going on. Can that stay or does that have to leave? So beginning to do that, beginning to look at the narratives, and then holding ourselves accountable. If I hear myself say something, or even if I think something that I've already discarded, I'm going to check myself. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to combat that with a positive. I'm going to combat it with the word of God. I'm going to combat it with an affirmation or a quote that builds me up instead of tearing me down. So having those lists of things, those quotes, those scriptures, those affirmations that we've been talking about throughout this time frame, that's going to encourage us. That's going to lift us. That's going to build us. Building connections. That's another one. Oftentimes when we're going through things, we don't really like people in our business. I talked in one of the videos about some cultures say whatever happens in the house stays in the house. Let's look at that from the idea of our thoughts being a house. Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. But if we don't address it, it destroys the house. And so let's talk about it. Talk about it to a trusted friend. Talk about it to your groups, if you have groups that you are part of. Talk about it with a mental health professional. There's nothing wrong with that. If something is causing you distress, if there's something in the house that's causing some problems, and you're having difficulty getting rid of it, speak to someone. There's no issue with getting help. Right? And so when you're building that support system, if part of your support system has to be a therapist, that's great. And part of your support system has to be your clergy, that's great. Part of your support system has to be a friend or a family member, that's great. That's a system. That's a system. And so encouraging you to build those systems. And then as we're building this courage in all these different areas, looking at taking small steps and counting small wins. Sometimes we think we have to run. But count the small wins. Count the small steps. They still move you forward. And so don't be afraid that, okay, I was planning to be here and now I'm here, and so now I'm discouraged. Please hear me. Every step you make moving forward is a step moving forward. Your steps do not have to look like my steps. My steps do not have to look like your steps. We just have to keep walking. And eventually we'll build those muscles and we'll start running. We'll build our endurance and we'll get faster. And we'll get stronger. But even in that, we may not be at the same pace, but we're still moving. And so if I look over to you and I see you ahead of me, I'm going to cheer you on. If I look over to you and I see you behind me, I'm going to pull you on. I'm going to encourage you. And that is why we need community. That is why we need support. That is why we should not do this walk of reflection and growing alone. It's such a beautiful journey to take with someone else. And so I'm encouraging you, as you're moving forward, strengthen your courage. You've got this. No stigma.